Hello and welcome to another episode of Field Notes, the weekly podcast from the Hindu Business Line on all things agribusiness. I'm your host, TR Vivek. Today, we are going to be talking about yet another horticultural crop of which India is by far the top producer in the world. It's a superfood, super tasty, it is super profitable for farmers, grows all year round only in India, and prefers hot and arid places. And we don't have a dearth of such areas. I'm talking about pomegranate. In the last decade or so, there's been a sort of mini boom in pomegranate production in India. We now produce roughly about 2.5 to 2.75 million tons compared to just about a million in 2010, which is why the fruit, which once was pretty expensive, can now be found at every street corner, often selling for less than 100 rupees a kilo. That said, India has barely scratched the surface of maximizing the health, ecological, and commercial profits from the exports that pomegranates offer. To talk about how this could be done, I'm joined on the show today by Pankaj Khandelwal, the founder and chairman of INI Farms, one of India's largest fruit exporters. Pomegranate accounts for nearly 40% of INI's revenue. INI itself is a fairly interesting company founded in 2009 by Pankaj and Purnima Khandelwal, who had very little agricultural background. Pankaj is a computer science graduate from IIT Kanpur and studied at IIM Calcutta, and his professional career was spent mostly in management consulting with blue chip firms like McKinsey and Company. Why and how then, from the rarefied echelons of pinstripe suits and high strategy to the rough and tumble of what is among the toughest places in the world to do business in, the Indian agricultural market? Let's get talking. Welcome to Field Notes, Pankaj. How are you?
Thank you, Vivek. I'm good. How are you?
I'm very fine, thank you. Pankaj, first let us tell us about your foray into agriculture and how did you come to form a company like INI with very little background in agriculture itself.
So, Vivek, there are two parts to that answer. One is how one becomes an entrepreneur in the first place, and second, why agriculture. Right? So, for me, interestingly, Purnima, who's also my wife, comes from a business background, and she was very clear that she wanted to be on her own, right? So, she ensured that, as you said, I used to work as in a professional profile earlier. And then in 2003, we actually decided to start on our own. And that basically was, for lack of anything better, I would say we started as a consulting firm. And as a part of the consulting firm itself, we got opportunity to actually understand and work in horticulture space very, very closely. And then once I had spent about a couple of years in that, I realized that this is where our passion lied. This is something, and this I'm still talking of, 2008, 2009, when agriculture wasn't really something that you would have, professionals leaving their jobs and getting into it full time, or was funded kind of space, right? It was very early days. However, we were actually very clear that this is something that what we want to make our career in. This is something that we felt really, really passionate and excited about. The reasons being fundamentally the kind of impact that this sector creates. Just by doing your job properly, you are actually impacting lives of millions of farmers, right? It's quite amazing how the additional 10,000 rupees, which people coming from urban background may or may not have that much value, but that 10,000 rupees for a farmer and the family, what it means was a realization. Actually, unless you've gone through it and you've seen it, it is impossible. The second realization was that actually this is something that can be done, right? I mean, it's not that just you coming from a perspective that okay, this is it's good to do. It's actually, we realized was that Indian agriculture, and especially horticulture, there was so much more to be done, whether it was in terms of knowledge, working with the farmers, creating the supply chain, right? So the solution was something, because of our international exposure, we understood that this is something that can be done and at scale, right? So when you club all these three things together, where the impact plus the fact that you can make a difference plus at scale, it actually made all the sense for us, right? So while I would say it was not the most sought after sector, especially coming from technology background where I came from, this was something which wasn't an obvious choice, but it was very clear that it was a choice that we made and we wanted to do. So that's how life took us to horticulture. It wasn't planned, but once we reached there, we knew this is what we wanted.
What was the entry point into agriculture? You were a management consultant. So were you consulting companies in the agri space? So when did the first brush with the idea that you could also join the agriculture space begin?
That's right. Yeah, it was part of our consulting effort, Vivek. We started advising organizations within the agriculture space. Actually, it was we got into it by chance. There was a client of ours who was Europe based, who actually was exploring agriculture space in India purely from an impact perspective. So that got us into horticulture space. After that, we did work with multiple organizations, and one of them was much more closer. It was nearly a 3-year engagement for us, where 4 of my team members and me actually went and helped the founders and promoters to run that company. So that's how we actually got initiated into this. But yes, it was through the consulting route, and fundamentally got to know and understand the space before we started on our.
But Pankaj, how do management consultants manage to do it? I mean, without a background in agriculture, advising companies that are in this space. I mean, it kind of reinforces the stereotypes, the sort of pejorative stereotypes that people have about management consulting.
See, what you need to understand is what you know and what you don't know, right? So I think where of course we don't have domain knowledge, right? It would be foolish for me to say that I understood. Yes, today after 15 years, I can say that I understand a bit of what I'm talking about. I didn't have domain knowledge, but the capability was fundamentally in terms of analytical skills, ability to build relationships, international. So just to give you a sense why it made sense, right? As we're speaking about it, the founder was fundamentally coming from a rural background of this particular company. He knew how to grow products, right? He was coming from a farmer background, but he didn't know how to build a supply chain, how to think about infrastructure, how to think about building a export-oriented supply chain. How do you build relationship and do your sales? So if you only think of it purely from the domain knowledge of saying how to grow fruits, I didn't know anything about it. But yes, we knew enough and more about infrastructure, about international transactions. That's the kind of knowledge that we brought into this. And the business requires both of them, right? The financial skills, marketing skills, sales skills. But yes, I mean, if I started to think that I can teach the farmer how to grow bananas, I knew that I would fail on that completely. But I knew how to take banana to the international market and sell it. Right? Okay. That's where it is.
Right. Pankaj, tell us about INI Farms. Since your start in 2009, give us a sense of how large the company is and what kind of commodities does it deal in?
Vivek, just to understand INI Farms, I would like to probably share a bit about our philosophy and how we started and what is the background of this. Right? We basically said that the most important thing is to build the entire supply chain from the farmer to the consumer. And that's where India's problem lies. It's not that we have amazing agroclimatic conditions, right? When the fruit is on the tree, it's probably amongst the best in the world. But our ability to take it from the farm to the consumer is where the problem lies, right? Lack of infrastructure, lack of post-harvest supply chains, understanding of international markets. So that's where it was important to understand. But what it meant was that we would end up being very deeply involved into specific products. And that was the fundamental philosophy, that we will deep dive into specific products, solve for them completely, and then move into a new product, right? So the choice that I'm talking about is whether we should have got into 50 different fruits and vegetables and work on it, all of it together, or actually pick one at a time and solve for it. We went for the focus, right? So that's the background that we obviously we decided to get into products which were around the year, because infrastructure wise it makes all the sense. Utilization of infrastructure is very important. So seasonality is a very important aspect, and that led us to choose pomegranate and banana as the two products that we will really.
Could you explain that a bit? The ability to use the infrastructure all year round. What does it mean, and why these two commodities?
Right. So what happens is that you need to have the infrastructure is a physical thing, right? And we are dealing with perishables. So the ability of an infrastructure to service a particular location is limited, right? So I cannot, typically you will see that the infrastructure should be within a 200-kilometer radius.
When
of
you
the
say
harvesting age.
infrastructure, would it mean, say, just to take an example, would it mean, say, a cold storage for
Correct.
some fruits?
That's right. So in our context, the infrastructure starts first from logistics perspective.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get the fruit from the farm to your pack house? Then the entire packing operations, where sorting, grading, final packing is done. Then you would have pre-cooling, cold storages, and loading, unloading infrastructure. That's what you are talking about. And then again, logistics infrastructure come into play because
Mm-hmm.
whichever markets you need to take it to. So it's a combination of fixed infrastructure, which is basically cold storages and packing houses, and you have the logistics infrastructure, which is the movable part.
Mm-hmm.
So what was important was the problem that happens in perishables is that because you are a seasonal product, if I were to, let's say, get into mango, right, I would have to create an infrastructure in Devgad and Ratnagiri, because that's where Alfonso is grown. Then you would have to do Kesar, which is of course part Maharashtra, but large part of it is in Gujarat. If I have to do Dasheri, I have to go to UP, right? And each one of them, if they have 1 or 2 months product, what do you do for remaining 10 months, right, with
Mm-hmm.
that infrastructure? Because you have people, you have the physical cost of the infrastructure getting created. This industry works when you can utilize the infrastructure for 80% capacity, right? Then the efficiencies start to come in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, therefore, we had to get into products which were round the year, right?
Right.
A location is basically growing that product 12 months. And that's the interesting part where you did mention that pomegranate, India is the only country in the world where pomegranate is grown round the year.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere else in the world, it's actually a seasonal product, right? And that too is Maharashtra centric for us because we are Mumbai based company.
And anyway,
So
Maharashtra accounts for about 80% of the produce, 75-80% of all the
yes,
pomegranates in India.
it used to, like 10 years back, it was almost 90%. Today, it
Mm-hmm.
would account for about 60-65%,
Okay.
because a lot of other states have caught on in a big way, whether it is Gujarat, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh. Uh, Karnataka always used to grow a bit of it. So the other 10% was always from Karnataka, but Andhra, Tamil Nadu. So if you really look at the expansion that has happened over the last 15 years or so of this
Mm-hmm.
commodity, it's phenomenal, right? So
Mm-hmm.
Maharashtra, yes, even today it's 65% is produced in Maharashtra, but yeah, but it was 90% about a decade ago.
Yeah. So carry on. You're talking about the infrastructure creation
Yes.
for and the availability of fruits all year round for both banana and pomegranates.
Yes. Given that we decided to be in specific product, right? The other way to use infrastructure is, 1 month you use for mango, next month you use it for grapes, if it's possible, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's a complex set of operation. For us, we said that we will solve for the entire supply chain, work with the farmers very, very closely, help them improve productivity and quality. So it was a long-term approach that we took, and therefore we needed products which were round the year products,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that the entire supply chain can work, and that's where pomegranate, banana kind of auto selected themselves, because very few products, you're aware, fruits, very few fruits are actually around the year, right? Most of them are seasonal in nature.
Mm-hmm.
So from that perspective, we chose these products. There was also the other angle, which was in terms of what was happening, right? So it's not just about the fact that you can grow or you can manage the supply chain. It is also about what the markets are looking for. That's the third element that you need to look at. And pomegranate was, of course, in the Asian cultures, it's been a known fruit, right? Ek anar saw bimar, right? All of us have grown with that kind of stories, and of course, it was a super premium, right? It would come into your household when you were young, or kids. At that point of time, it would come only when someone was sick, right? Because it was supposed to have so much therapeutic value, but very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that is something in Asian cultures was always known, but in the Western cultures, this is actually a relatively new thing. For them, it's a superfood that has happened because of its properties, but this is nearly a 20-year-old story, right? So when we were looking at this, we realized that India is the only country which can produce round the year.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere else, it is like 2 month, 3 month crop. The second important thing was that our fruit is actually very, very good quality, right? I mean, you can always debate which is the best one, but there's no doubt about it that Indian fruit is absolutely top rank as far as the varieties is concerned. So
Mm-hmm.
that was the other advantage we could see, and it was taking that shape of being a superfood. So the demand was also increasing substantially at that point of time. So that's how we looked at all these parameters and said, yes, these are the products that we want to get into. And of course, pomegranate was where we started the story.
Mhm, mhm. Pankaj, globally, you spoke about this spurt in demand for pomegranates over the last 2 decades because of this new billing of it as a superfood. Um, Tell us in what ways is it consumed in the West? Is it just a table fruit, or is it processed? And which are your biggest export markets?
Pomegranate, while yes, from a consumption perspective, people want to have it, and it's a very difficult fruit to consume.
Right.
Right? It's
Yeah.
to open it up. It's an
That's
effort in
messy. Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it can really mess your white walls if you're trying to open this up if you're not used to it.
Mhm.
So yes, the Western consumer especially finds it very difficult. Yes, the whole fruit always sells. There's no doubt about it, but it also has two very interesting usage that you will come across. One is arils, which is the seeds of pomegranate, which is what you actually eat. What we do as a business is we actually take the difficult part of opening the fruit out. We actually open it in India, put it into convenience pack, a 100-gram cup or 200-gram punnet. So there are different packagings which happen. It remains fresh. It's absolutely as if you're opening the fruit at your home and eating it. But that
How
becomes
long
a
does it stay fresh? Once
it
peeled.
stays fresh for at this point of time. We have reached a capability of 19 days. When
Mhm.
we started, it was about 12 days. So
So
it's
these
a
are vacuum sealed
that's
cups.
right. So these are vacuum sealed. So there's a full pack know-how and
Okay.
technology associated with. If I were to say, tech of course is used mostly in IT context nowadays,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
there's lot of engineering and knowledge associated with in improving the shelf life.
Okay.
But we were very clear that we would not use preservatives, right? So it is completely fresh, and basically using and managing the vacuum and the breathing pattern of the fruit is how you manage this. So today it's at about 19 days.
Okay.
So you basically end up that's the other thing that we created, this convenience pack. The second usage of these convenience packs is basically in a lot of salads, a lot of healthy eating processes. So a lot of restaurants in the world started to use it in a big way. So that's the other bulk packaging that comes into picture. And the last one is actually in juicing.
Mhm.
So simultaneously, you must be aware that the entire cold press juice took off in a
Right.
big way over last 10 years or so.
Mhm.
Internationally, that's been a big rage, and therefore, again, in pomegranate, that became a very big part of our business, where a lot of juicers across the world wanted to get this, right? So fundamental, and we have taken all the effort in removing, or the hard work has already been done in India. So from that perspective, it becomes a very high value product for these people. But the usages, as I said, are whole fruit, in-house consumption in salads, and also in juicing.
Right. Pankaj, as I mentioned in my introduction, there seems to have been a mini boom in the production of pomegranates in India over the last decade. What has changed? And despite the doubling or tripling of production, we seem to have barely scratched the surface.
Vivek, it's a very interesting case study if you were to look at it. So what happened, of course, was part of it. The entire ecosystem evolved, right? Whether it is from a communication perspective or the infrastructure perspective, for farmers to learn from each other, but also organizations like us, ours coming in and actually standardizing the production system, right? So while the knowledge always existed with specific farmers, we actually codified it. We put it into a set of processes, so we could actually go into Gujarat, into Rajasthan, and help the farmers actually improve their production techniques and ensure that they also start to achieve production standards which are of the same quality as it was done in Maharashtra by a few farmers, right? Expansion into Maharashtra happened. So a combination of these things, where organizations like ours came into picture, uh, the government started to promote pomegranate in a very aggressive manner. So if you look at and you go to the work that happened in Gujarat and in Rajasthan, a lot of it they realized that the microclimate and the environment was suitable for pomegranate to be grown. They started promoting that with the farmers. A lot of work happened in training, educating, taking those farmers from these places, getting them into Maharashtra, working with other farmers, educating. So a lot of education went into that. Once that came into picture, right? And the way Indian ecosystem works is that one farmer learns from his neighbor, right? So you start to build clusters around this entire thing. So in Kutch, a massive cluster has emerged. In
Mhm.
Rajasthan, if you look at in Bardmer, in next 5 years, you'll see extremely large cluster emerging into that particular area, right? So it's a combination of India's strength as agroclimatic condition, the development of the infrastructure, our micro level, our kind of organizations coming in, farmer training, farmers having access to all that. I mean, they have a problem. They can reach out to my supervisor sitting in Maharashtra today, right? So all these things have really helped us where this fruit, because it is in massive demand, it is a superfruit. The consumer was not a problem. It was actually the production system which was a problem. So once you've solved for it, it actually grew dramatically, right? From about 1 million tons of production, we've already hit 2.5 million tons in like 10 years or so, right? So it's a fascinating journey that we are talking about. At the same time, economic growth has ensured that the fruit demand has gone up.
Right.
So it's not, we're still not able to meet the demand. So there's so much more upside to be had by growing it much more and expanding it to a larger number of farmers.
Mhm.
We're still scratching the surface, as you said, to quote.
Mhm. Mhm. Pankaj, why is it a farmer-friendly produce? I hear stories of pomegranate giving better profits to farmers. Could you tell us about the farm economics of growing pomegranate?
So I'll answer that question in two parts, Vivek. One is the basic economics of pomegranate fruit. The second, we need to take into consideration certain risk aspect of it. So those are the two things that it's important to understand. One challenge with pomegranate, while it's extremely profitable, right? So if you would have enough number of farmers who would have a revenue of about 10 lakhs per acre and costs close to about, depending on various practices, but between 1 to 1.5 lakh per acre is the cost of production. So it's something which, from a profitability perspective, it's a super high profitable product. That is one part. The second part that one needs to take into consideration, it's a long gestation crop. So it takes 3 years for the first crop to come to be commercially productive. Right.
Right.
This is a big concern for small farmers because obviously they don't have the ability to not get any produce out for 3 years, right? So
Mhm.
that becomes a bit of a concern as far as this entire
Which
thing is concerned
perhaps
for the
by
farmer.
default makes it a sort of rich farmer's crop, somebody who may
It
have
does.
other sources of income
That's
or
right.
stable sources of income to invest in a new line, so to say.
Correct. It's easier for them. Also, otherwise, as a smallhold farmer, I would have to just put, if I own 3 acres, I would put 1 acre for pomegranate, right? So it takes little longer for them to get the transformation going. But yes, it tends to be, it does require investments in the initial years, which uh, tends to be a problem for smallhold farmers. The third thing that, as I talked about, was the risk part of it. This is actually prone to certain fungal diseases,
Mhm.
and those diseases can actually destroy the entire plantation, right? So that risk is the other thing that one needs to take into consideration. So when you think of it from a farmer perspective, while at a unit economics level it is highly profitable crop, it takes longer gestation time, and there is a higher degree of risk of the plantation getting wiped out completely, right? So those are the things that one needs to take into consideration. That's why we advise the farmers not to fully go after it. Yes, it looks more profitable, but having the right balance in terms of managing risk is also very, very important.
Mhm. Is intercropping possible given the long gestation period?
So Vivek, that's possible, but also it what it does, it increases the complexity of production for the
Right.
farmer.
Mhm.
So when you're growing two crops, they would attract different kind of pests and diseases. So while it is possible, it is a higher degree of technical competence to do it, right? So we would rather tell the farmer that, okay, divide your plot into different parts and do it in that manner rather than doing intercropping, because in our experience, actually, it puts the farmer at a slightly higher risk. So yeah, it's a balance. It's a question of the competence of the farmer to be able to do it. But by default, we don't specifically recommend that.
Okay. Okay. You mentioned a big cluster which has come up in Kutch in Gujarat,
Yes.
and also other clusters being formed in Barmer, for example, in Rajasthan. This seems to be an especially water efficient crop, and makes me think that quite suitable for many arid parts of this country.
That's right. So one of the good things why these governments started promoting that. In fact, if you look at even Sholapur, which is a rain shadow area in Maharashtra, is where the entire production started for pomegranate in 70s, right? So it is one of those crops which requires much less water compared to, let's say, banana or sugarcane. And it's also a very sturdy crop. So even if you don't give water for some time, it will not die, right? So those are the two big advantages of pomegranate, and that has helped immensely in growing into areas which are arid. It does require water. I mean, it is not something that cannot. So even Badmer area has developed only after the water from Rajasthan Canal has actually ended up being there, and sufficient water is provided, because while the plant would survive, the right quality of crop would not come. So the fruit requires some water to be given to it to be able to manage it, right? So it's a combination of things that is required. But yes, it is a crop that requires much less water and has therefore a higher degree of potential to grow in multiple parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Pankaj, in what ways do you work with with farmers? Is the volume of fruits that you get? Do you have contract farming, or are you a trader where you aggregate stuff from the farmers and then trade in that commodity?
So Vivek, again, that's been one of the biggest learning over all these years, I would say, in terms of how do you work with the farmer in India.
Mm-hmm.
While initially we started with the idea of fixed price contracts, volume contracts with the farmer, over a period of time we realized it's a model that does not work in India at all.
Mm-hmm.
For us, we were very clear that
Why does it not work?
it does not work. There was a lot of heartburn, but I'll tell you why it doesn't work. The reason it doesn't work is that farmer actually is in a very, from a cash flow perspective, when you think of his business, is actually in a very difficult situation. He puts money or inflows in terms of investments are happening around the year, and only one day he gets the crop out. Now, on that one day, he has to optimize the value for his farm. I mean, if he's going to get 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee extra compared to the contracted price, actually we cannot blame the farmer for optimizing on that, right? Not everyone does it, but the fact is that it's a very bad cash flow business. Money goes in all around the year and output comes only once, and something goes wrong, he loses everything, right? So
Right.
high risk, very bad cash flow situation, and when he has that opportunity, he has to optimize, right? That's the reality of life. These are smallhold farmers, earning about 1.5 lakhs, 2 lakhs maximum at an annual level, and one time in a year. It's a very difficult situation for the farmer. So we realized that our goal was not actually to tell the farmer that we are going to buy from you at the fixed price. Our model changed to saying that we need to buy from the farmer at a premium compared to a prevailing market price. So we will always give a premium. So the farmer has no reason to go out of our contract, right? So we take that out completely. The premium could range depending, but for us the quality was very important. So what is it that I am getting by providing that premium? Otherwise, businesses do not work. It has to be a give and take and fair to everyone. So for us, quality was extremely important. So our premium can range from 10% to 40%, okay, compared to the normal market price, depending on the quality of fruit. And quality is not just determined by how the fruit looks, how does it taste. It's a combination of things that one needs to look into. And when we define what is a quality, it's a more complex process of defining quality rather than just the cosmetics or the taste part of it. So what we fundamentally do is we help the farmer improve quality first. We do not charge anything to the farmer, but it's a relationship building exercise for us. Because we are vested interest in getting better quality from the farmer. Once that is done, before the harvest, we will run all the tests, determine what grade and what quality is this product of. Depending on that, we define the premium for the farmer, and compared to the prevailing market price, we pay a premium for the farmer. Why does it work for us? We get an assurance that we will get this volume. There's no reason for the farmer to go out. We get an assurance on quality. It helps us to build a brand out of India. Our credibility is at stake here, right? It's a natural product. You have to have consistently good quality pomegranate coming out of it. That allows us to build a brand, and that allows us to charge a premium in international markets. So that is the positive cycle that works for us, where we are able to pay a premium to the farmer. But we work very, very closely with the farmers in improving their package of practices, quality improvement. We have physical teams on the ground who are doing this, right? So it's a very high touch model, as we call it, compared to a low touch model of a call center support or remote support in some sense. we are actually on the ground with the farmers.
Mm-hmm. Pankaj, why then is there so much opposition to the farm laws and particularly contract farming? Does the model that INI uses, does it have any lessons or any roadmap for us to be fearless about it and going into models like contract farming?
Vivek, I actually believe that this is a model that would help the farmers significantly. It's not that uh, you know uh, uh, it's a very complex subject as far as the farm laws itself are concerned.
No, I'm talking
We
specifically about the contract farming clauses and the fears around
Okay.
them.
No, so see the point with respect to contract farming, there's no risk to the extent that I know of in terms of the farmers losing their land or anything like that, right? None of that is real. I've never seen it in my life, right? So that is one point that I can talk about. Uh, see the ultimately these are all things where contract farming has failed in India largely because of the fact that one or the other party always had a reason to go out of the contract, right? Where if I have a fixed price contract, the farmer goes and sells it to someone else at a higher price, it's a problem for me. If I don't honor the contract and not take the produce if the prices are down, right? Because I would also leave the farmer and go to another farmer who I'm not contracted and take the lower crop at a lower value, right? So the contracts do not work because of these kind of problems. For us, it has worked beautifully. I can't really comment on what would happen at a global level, but over these years, two products, pomegranate and banana, we have managed to put it onto world trading map. It's not something that we have very clear success stories around it, and we've done exactly the same rule book we have followed. We work with the farmers, improve the quality, and pay a premium to the farmer. He's free to sell to someone else. I don't even bind him into selling it to me, and I also tell him that listen, I will buy only if the quality is right. So that's our model. It's in that sense it's actually a very loose contract farming model. We are not tied into each other, but
Right.
it's a trust based system and a commercially sensible for both the parties, right? We are not getting into a situation where if I contracted my banana at 10 rupees a kg, if the market price is 12 or 8, what would happen, right? For me, it doesn't even matter. We have basically figured out a solution where we don't have to worry about it and the farmer does not have to worry about it. So
Mhm.
from that perspective, it's worked very well. Banana, for example, it has become 1,000 crore industry in 10 years. We used to export zero banana 10 years ago, right? It is 3 times larger than mango today
Mhm.
in terms of exports. It's one of the massive success stories that we have had in this country, and it is largely on account of working together with the farmers, right? The farmers have benefited, organizations have benefited. We have created jobs in the rural sector, and it's generally, I mean, more than 40,000 tons just in two products we export out of India, right? So from when you look at it, from my perspective, it's extremely successful as far as these two products that I've seen very, very closely. The third one that I can talk about is grapes. I am not involved into it, but grapes, again, if you look at it, is one of the biggest success stories that we have had. The only thing that I can tell you is the common link in all of this is export markets, where quality makes a lot of difference, right?
Right.
So it's a limited set of farmers who improve the quality and therefore take a premium for their product is what we are able to address. If
Yeah,
we
in a commodity like banana, India was always the largest producer
That's right.
in the world, but yet we were not on the export map at all.
At all. Absolutely not. I mean, the success has to go to the farmers and organization like us who have come together and made it work, right? I can't say whether it's worked in potato, whether it is not worked in potato, and how it has worked out. But I do think that if the commercial interests are aligned and the goal is not to, from both from farmers and from us, not to cheat each other, then we find solutions. And we've had huge successes on it. There may be many failures. We need to learn from the successes more than anything else.
Right. Pankaj, how much scope and room is there for India to significantly improve or sorry, rather increase the area under pomegranate, or are there ways in which we could ramp up production even faster?
Yeah, so if when I look at from a demand perspective, can we grow? Can we consume 5x of the current production? The answer is yes. It's a product which is still very very expensive. Whether you took it from a domestic market perspective or an exports market perspective, so the demand is extremely high, right? A 5x on that is clearly possible. So it's not a demand problem, it's a supply side problem.
Mhm.
As I said, the challenge in this is fundamentally the gestation period and the risks associated. So there's a lot of work that is required in solving the financial issues for the farmer. So it becomes, a financial engineering problem
Right.
rather than just saying that whether we have the right environment and the right land and can we grow it or not. So it's reached that stage, which is good. It wasn't something that we could have spoken 10 years back, but we will have to do some of these ways to solve it for the farmers so that more and more farmers can come into play. But yes, it's actually expanding. Whether can we expedite that? Can we take it to do it at a faster level? I actually believe we can. A more concentrated approach, and I'm very hopeful about the one product, one district kind of approach, which is cluster-driven approach, where a lot of these initiatives have started to happen, and also the value chain approach that is there in terms of the mindset. What we started about 12, 13 years ago was a value chain approach, right? Where we will work with the farmers, manage the supply chain for a specific product, and build international market, right? Specific products. I think that's a mindset shift that has happened. So I'm very hopeful about it, Vivek, and I really think it's possible. It's a question of having the right energy and effort in orchestrating it, is how I see it.
Pankaj, what are the ways in which to sort of untangle the knot that you mentioned about, cash flow issues and high gestation period? What are some of the ideas that can help us solve this problem? Especially given the fact that this has immense potential for profitability.
See, as I said, the problems are twofold. One is how do we ensure that the farmers are covered for the first 3 years when the gestation period is long, right? So that's a tough problem to solve. But beyond subsidies or at least loans, which are aligned with that kind of thinking process, is going to be an important way to think of it from a financial perspective, right? So it's a cash flow problem.
Because again, if you read the new edible oil and oil palm policy, the government wants to do the same for oil palm, which again has a 3-year gestation period, and it's trying to work out a rather generous package for farmers who opt for oil palm.
So a similar story here would make a lot of difference. We don't have those kind of syllabus. At least I'm not aware of that this is being done in the horticulture sector specifically with respect to these kind of products. So helping farmers on those kind of situations, one is going to actually open the tap in a big way. The second thing, which is also financial in nature, is the insurance aspect of it. I think as a country, we're still lagging significantly behind on the agriculture insurance, right? Or the cost of that insurance continues to be so high that it's very prohibitive. So there's a lot more work to be done as far as that's not just true for pomegranate, it is true for almost the entire sector itself. And I do believe
what is the rate of failure, the pesticide driven failures among the farmers that you work with?
That depends on crop to crop and product to product. So for example, banana, you don't have that kind of problem. The crop does not fully fail. What happens is that there's a quality deterioration. So instead of 10 rupees, the product could become worth 4 rupees
I'm
or 5
talking about
rupees.
pomegranates, you said that the entire
In
plantation
case of
can be wiped out.
yeah, in case of pomegranate, it's actually a far bigger risk. I would rather say that I've seen about 5% kind of failure in terms of the entire plantation getting wiped out. There's also issues of pests. So plantation getting wiped out is a complete disaster, right? The entire thing is gone. But a lot of times you also lose a crop in a year, right? So whether it is a weather-driven incident, it is a pest-driven incident, a lot of those things can go wrong as far as that is concerned. So pomegranate is a relatively difficult or a higher risk product. I would rather say that the chances of, for a farmer, the chances of losing a crop is about 20% overall. Not the entire plantation getting lost. That is about 5%, but the crop being not coming in a year is close to 20%. So that's fairly high. And therefore that becomes, it's also a problem of, some bit of a scientific and a technological breakthroughs that are required in solving these problems. And our systems there, I find it's relatively weak, right? Where that kind of research effort is not really going into in terms of solving these problems. Right. So yeah, it's also a next level stage. I mean, I don't expect it to be solved yesterday, but yes, that's the effort that would be required to make it work.
What about research at various arms of eye care and the horticulture department? And in what ways do private players collaborate with them to expedite some of the research on failure prevention?
Yeah, so see, there are dedicated research stations that are there. I would rather say the output is not satisfactory at this point of time, and I would also put the blame partly on the private sector
Mhm.
because we're not working together, right? Just expecting research community to come up with solutions without having the entire context and funding support, all that is required. So it's a combination of things. So yes, the research stations exist. We met a few scientists, so they're definitely dedicated and committed and wanting to solve for it. But yeah, commercially solving every problem, as I said, it's a more complex thing than just having people out there, right? So I think the industry and the uh, academia, in that sense, or the research institutions, actually need to work much more closely together. Large amount of funding needs to flow from the government entities into these kind of research work because naturally they are uncertain by definition. These are research projects, right?
Mhm.
So they have a long gestation period. So a lot of effort would be required to make it work. I would say that it's a combination of what the government, the research station, and the private sector needs to do. The farmers independently cannot do it, but we also have to realize that organizations like INI have started to come in into agriculture sector in last just 15 years, right? So it's a natural evolution process is how I see it, but we need to expedite it. It's going to be an extremely important part of next stage of development of this industry.
Right, right. Thanks a lot, Pankaj, for joining us. And I hope that you are able to crack some of these problems and solve for it, because I think this seems a fairly sort of exciting opportunity that we should not let go of so easily.
Vivek, absolutely. We've solved a lot of problems, and as a natural product, a lot of them remains. It's a continuous journey, but I agree. It's something that we need to work towards and solve for it. And I'm absolutely sure we will solve it. So, but it's been a great pleasure, Vivek, speaking with you. Thank you so much for having me.